All right, I now bring to you your moderator, Elizabeth Abel. Elizabeth is a corporate vice president at CCS Fundraising, a leading strategic consulting and fundraising management firm to nonprofit organizations worldwide. Since joining CCS in 2013, Elizabeth has partnered with institutions in the education, arts and culture, religion, and advocacy sectors to plan and implement transformational fundraising campaigns with revenue goals ranging from 5 million to 500 million. And in this role, she provides counsel on strategic planning, principal and major gifts fundraising, and volunteer engagement. Elizabeth has also directed campaign planning studies, served in interim development roles, and planned annual campaigns and special fundraising events. Elizabeth is an instructor at the School of Social Policy and Practice, where she serves on the board of Nonprofit Leadership Alumni Association. And in 2020, she was inducted into the SP2 Alumni Hall of Fame for her work with mission-driven organizations. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us today.
Thank you, Stacy, and welcome to everyone who's joining today's conversation. I am absolutely thrilled to be here, thrilled to moderate this conversation with my distinguished fellow NPL alumni, who I will introduce momentarily. So we're joined today by Allison Floyd, Joel Ballou, Rose Brown, and Sharmila Pal. And I'm really excited to facilitate this conversation where we'll get to hear from them about their own NPL career journeys, how the program shaped their career trajectories, and insights and advice that they have for you as you begin yours. So let me start by sharing the bios of our panelists today. So bear with me for just a couple of moments. I want to give everyone the attention that they deserve. So we'll start with Allison Floyd. So Allison started her career in child welfare as a social worker with the Philadelphia-based nonprofit Turning Points for Children. After identifying a gap in agency service, Allison was selected to lead the organization's Emergency Hunger Relief Initiative. In 2013, Allison launched the Food and Wellness Network at Turning Points that quickly grew to annually connect thousands of local families to a healthier, choice-based food pantry and other essential services. Allison then served as the operations coordinator for the Philadelphia-based nonprofit Repositioning Fund, a pooled fund supporting formal long-term collaborations between nonprofits. In this role, she led the startup operation for the fund's grant-making efforts, expediting the application process and delivering more precise grantee data for impact assessments. She currently serves as the Chief of Staff for Development, Marketing, and Communications at the national education nonprofit City Year. In this role, she coordinates the strategy and operations in support of optimizing City Year's external positioning while enhancing focus on private sector fundraising, development operations, and transformational investments for the organization. She holds a bachelor's degree in social work from LaSalle University and her master's in nonprofit leadership from SP2. Joel Ballou is the executive director of Open Doors in Harrisonburg, Virginia, a nonprofit whose mission is to provide shelter, compassionate support, and access to services for individuals experiencing homelessness. Over the past year, Joel has worked to bring stability and direction to the central service Open Doors offers, operating a low-barrier shelter for the city of Harrisonburg with the surrounding areas. Open Doors provides access to healthcare, housing, and case management services for over 200 unique individuals annually with a staff of 15. Joel's past work experience includes facilities management, capital fundraising, and strategic planning. He credits his experiences in the NPL program at Penn with expanding and developing the leadership skills needed to thrive in today's culture as a nonprofit leader. Joel believes that making a positive impact in our communities through nonprofits will require creativity, collaboration, and communication that is mindful of the past, but bold enough to transcend barriers of exclusion, injustice, and boring ways of thinking. Next, I'll introduce Rose Brown, who is an adjunct business and nonprofit professor in Raleigh, North Carolina. Rose is also a PhD student studying organizational behavior and leadership at UNC. Her research investigates the context needed in the workplace to effectively empower and professionally advance historically disenfranchised populations. Rose is a community relations professional with a Master of Science in Nonprofit Leadership from SP2, a professional certificate in organizational leadership and social work from Penn, and a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with a concentration in organizational management from UNC Charlotte. Rose is an active member of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence Speakers Bureau and the Mecklenburg County Domestic Violence Speakers Bureau. Rose is also helping the Orange County Rape Crisis Center create a Survivor Speaker Bureau, addressing an increased need for raising awareness and alleviating domestic and sexual violence. She aims to leave a legacy of hope for women of underrepresented and marginalized populations and was recently awarded the University of North Carolina at Charlotte Black Alumni Chapter 2020 Excellence in Leadership Award for Public Service. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Sharmila Pal, who serves as the current CEO of Amrita Seattle, based in between the Seattle office and program suites in utmost rural parts of India. Sharmila brings Amrita Seattle 8 years of lived experience in all aspects of its grassroots service and social impact. She is a seasoned globetrotter and an international marine research voyageur with 256 days spent at sea. Sharmila previously served as the organization's program officer, traveling to rural areas in Nepal and India to visit clients. She holds 2 bachelor's degrees in chemistry and oceanography from the University of Washington, followed by her master's in marine chemistry from the University of South Carolina and nonprofit leadership here at Penn. So with that, a huge welcome to our panelists. Really, again, thrilled that you'll be joining us today. Looking forward to hearing from you, and let's kick off our moderated conversation. So the first question I'd like to ask you today, how did the Nonprofit Leadership Program prepare you with the skills for a vibrant career in the nonprofit industry or social impact sector? So Allison, why don't you kick us off here?
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Hey, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. So for me, I think that in addition to sort of the skills and knowledge, a lot of it was just about confidence. I suffer from a little bit of that imposter syndrome. So, making me feel like I belonged, that I had great ideas, that I had a network of peers to lean on. So it really, gave me a great network of folks to connect with, to share my ideas with. It also left me with a better understanding of organizational dynamics, of group dynamics, and then how to really work and excel in teams, and to where to focus my energy in that. And then through that, as you heard in my bio, it also connected me with the Nonprofit Repositioning Fund, which was the first time that I got some inside the boardroom experience with funders. And so it's just got me a little bit more exposure to the types of discussions and decision making that goes into those types of those types of decisions, what they care about. And so it was kind of like an inside look at all of the funders I'd been trying to get money from for the last however many years. I was in the boardroom with them while they were making the decisions, and I got to hear what they cared about and what kind of questions they asked. And so that was a very unique and special experience for me. And then I also took a public speaking class, which really helped me just sort of figure out what I wanted to say, speak my truth, and just be a little bit more direct. So those were some of the highlights for me and how it prepared me for my career.
Wonderful. Thank you, Allison. Joel, what about you? How did the NPL program prepare you to be the executive director?
Sure. Some of my background in nonprofits is really in faith-based nonprofits. I have a Master of Divinity degree and work directly with really faith-based nonprofits. And so the NPL program and the chance to connect with professors like Sydney Hargrove, who also has an MDiv and has that background and that investment in the faith-based nonprofit sector, which is a huge part of nonprofit, the nonprofit world, was really meaningful. But for me, that background in faith-based nonprofits, they tend to use a little bit different vocabulary when talking about what motivates people and what gets people engaged in the mission and what's happening. And so I was well versed in that faith-based nonprofit world, And the NPL program helped me to really expand that in a way that I think captured a lot of a different kind of professionalism in the way that I was able to frame and focus the way I communicate with people. The other big piece is, NPL cohorts are amazing groups of people, and I like the image of a steeping tea. You measure your tea leaves out and you add those. Pretty soon you've got this, kind of colloid mixture of something totally different. And I felt, at least, being surrounded by such an amazing group of people in my cohort affected me in a way that expanded my experience, my ability to conceptualize things. It's just an incredibly talented group of people, and you can't help but allow all of their experience and just overall amazing talent to help to influence you. And so that was a big part for me as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Rose, what would you add?
For me, I would say that the curriculum and relevant electives definitely provided me with the training, the skill set, and the character traits that I needed to be a more intentional nonprofit leader. Having a background in nonprofit leadership to some degree before coming to Penn, I thought I knew enough, but definitely there was room for growth. And so what I took away was definitely confidence, to Allison's point, for sure. Confidence in my ability to serve as a nonprofit leader, confidence in my ability to learn, to adapt, to be flexible, to be resourceful, to not only be a good leader, but also be a good follower and a good teammate as well. Definitely appreciated my time at Penn, and like Joel said as well, it was an amazing group of students, and we have an amazing group of alumni as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. So let's think back to your post-NPL job search. How did you get your job, and what experiences led you to this position? Sharmila, why don't we hear from you first?
Thanks. Yeah, I was serving as the program officer for Amrita Seattle, which is an organization that serves both the underprivileged populations in Seattle, US, and also the major work is done in India. I was a program officer in India for about 6 to 7 years, and it was with that time that I wanted to take the org to a next level, and that's what led me to getting my second master's at NPL. I would definitely say the curriculum, it gives you an entire toolkit basically to do whatever you would want to do in the social impact sector. And for me, it was, I needed to become the next CEO of Amrita Seattle to take it to the next level. And the way the NPL program was designed, it basically gave me all the skill sets I needed, the confidence, the trust in myself that yes, I can do this. And you're part of the Penn community for forever, and you meet an incredible cohort. You have incredible professors, and I think I was pretty much I joined the NPL program.
Sharm, did she freeze for you?
So I wanted to I joined the NPL program with the mindset to transition from the program officer to the CEO levels. It was very, it was a very sort of a linear track for me that, I needed these tools to get to here so that I could do my job better. So, yeah.
Wonderful. That's great. Joel, what about you?
Yeah, so the NPL program for me was in many ways a broadening. I was executive director at a conference center that's about an hour and a half outside of Philly. and knew that it was time to make a transition in terms of vocation from where things were at there. And so the NPL program gave me a way to broaden the options that I have in terms of that, but also bring with me what I had already experienced in terms of being able to make sense of my nonprofit work prior to the program. Like Sharmila said, the connections that you make through Penn help to broaden and give a sense of a different sense of confidence as you move forward. So I was finishing up my work at the conference center following graduation, knowing that I was in the job search, had a few things that I thought were looking pretty good. And then a global pandemic hit. So, you know, that kind of puts everything on hold for everyone. In the midst of that, though, I kept getting these job alerts for this executive director position near where I'd grown up in Virginia, here in the Shenandoah Valley. But it was an organization that worked with homelessness, something that I had absolutely zero experience with. But I applied anyway. They were very excited. They were really excited to see, you know, people in Virginia know the name Penn, and they know exactly what that is, and it has some brand recognition and a real sense of reputation for excellence. I mean, that is a huge part of the education that you're getting through the NPL program, and so that was pretty exciting to the group. One of the big pieces in terms of challenging was being honest with the interview committee that I worked with, and being open with the fact that I had this fundraising experience that they were excited about because they knew that they were getting ready to think about a capital campaign. I had facilities management. I had these other pieces, but they were willing to in some ways recognize that there were going to be pieces that would be growth areas for me, and we worked at that in the way that we staffed things. I would say, in terms of thinking about job search, think about yourself as the total the total package of who you are and what skills and background you bring. And then mix that with your experiences with Penn in a way that helps to, in some ways, surprise you for where you end up being at following graduation.
Thanks. That's really insightful. Really appreciated. Allison and Rose, was there anything surprising or challenging as part of your job search? Something that you kind of look back on now and you're, you know, maybe surprised that happens, or you wish you knew something, kind of any roadblocks in your career trajectory that you've learned from?
I can definitely speak to a couple of challenges in the spirit of transparency. Definitely after graduation, it took a little bit of a while to first be able to, or to be selected for a job. For a position at a nonprofit in North Carolina. I was like, okay, the mission is wonderful. It's great. It aligns with what I care about, my interests, what I'm passionate about. But for my initial job, it was not the best fit. And so I know that that's something that, you know, sometimes people don't talk about is, you know, as soon as you graduate, you get a job, you're good. But for me, it was not the best fit. And I ended up leaving and actually working at the American Red Cross, which is a world-renowned humanitarian organization, and serving as a senior volunteer recruitment specialist and overseeing the state of North Carolina as well as counties in South Carolina, which was very rewarding. And to Joel's point, the pandemic hit, which definitely affected, you know, all of our duties and how that changed. But being able to have the education and the training that I got from the NPL program, I was able to adapt very quickly. And in general, with the nonprofit sector, you have to have such a strong sense of adaptability because things are ever changing constantly, whether it be a budget, whether it be your environment, whether it be your job title or your job duties. So yeah, I ran into some issues initially finding the best fit, but found a home. And so it was definitely a process.
Thank you so much for sharing and for being so honest. Allison, any additional thoughts you'd like to add? Anything that was surprising or challenging in your own job search?
Yeah, I would double click on what Rose was saying about, just being patient both with yourself and with the process. When I graduated, it was back in 2016, so I didn't have a global pandemic to compete with, which I'm grateful for, but I did relocate. I was relocating to Boston, and so I had spent my whole career in Philadelphia, and I had this entire network there. And I had sort of this grand plan that it was just going to sort of transplant itself to Boston. That didn't happen. I had to sort of rebuild, and I had professors that would make me connections there, and friends that would make me connections there, and I would meet with folks. But it was a bit of a slow start, and it took a little longer than I would have hoped. And I also had a certain, I was sort of fixated on a certain type of job. I had this idea that I wanted to move into nonprofit consulting, and in hindsight, I think I actually would have probably hated that job, and I'm glad that I did not land there. But I think a big lesson for me was not to get fixated on finding like the right exact role, but more the right organization and the right team. So when I did eventually find my job with City Year, it wasn't a role that I would have looked at, in the first month of my job search and been like, that's the one for me. It was more, I had a conversation with somebody that worked there. I learned more about the organization. I met with the woman who would eventually become my boss. And every step along the way, I just felt like it more and more sense of like, oh, I belong there. I definitely belong there. But the role itself, I was like, oh, it's okay. But I knew that once I got into the organization, there would be room for me to adapt and grow it. And that absolutely has been the case. So I would encourage folks to don't get fixated on a certain role or what you think an exact idea of what your next job could be, but to just sort of look for more of like the organization and can you build your career within that? Because I found that really worked for me, and to just be patient with yourself and have some good boundaries around your job search. Don't let it consume you, because it can be stressful, and especially coming out of Penn, you set some high expectations for yourself. So that would be my thoughts.
It's interesting. It seems like there's a few narrative threads from this question. Number one is, really think not only about the mission, but also about the culture and the work environment of the organization that you're joining. And kind of two, I know specifically Sharmila going from program officer to CEO, Allison thinking about your own growth to now chief of staff of development, marketing communications, thinking about, in addition to culture, what are the growth opportunities at the organization and what do those look like for you? And when you think about your skill sets, where do your skill sets relate to the growth opportunities that are available, so that once you're, joining an organization or a firm, number one, is it the right cultural fit? And then kind of beyond that, do you have opportunities for growth over the next 2, 3, or 5+ years? So what advice do you have for NPL students who are preparing for life beyond Penn? I'm really excited to hear what each of you have to say for this question. So let's start with Rose, and then we'll go Sharmila, Joel, and Allison.
Certainly. This is a great question. This is the question I was like the most excited about, by the way. So one thing is just kind of piggybacking off of what I stated before, but just to expand, when it comes to your job search, again, also piggybacking off of what Allison just said, be patient, allow yourself some grace, be kind and be compassionate to yourself, because job searching in general can just be very stressful. It can cause anxiety. And so just patience, and also know that not every position is a good fit for you, and that's okay. That's part of you just being honest with yourself and being authentic, and also reflecting whatever integrity you have for different values. Just keep that in mind. Also, learning does not stop just because you graduate from the program. So continue to be a lifelong learner with whatever organization that you join. If there's workshops in the area and they're free, go check them out. If they're online, that's even better. Any type of free trainings that you can get just to add to your toolkit so you can make a better impact within whatever role you're in, professionally or personally, definitely do that. Okay, also with the confidence and the skills that you gain in the program, keep in mind that you are qualified, and also remember to always just try. So even if a position seems like, you know what, I don't meet the qualifications for this, or to Joel's point, you know, I have this area of growth where I don't have, you know, that particular experience, apply anyways. The worst case you're going to get back is a no, but at least you know that you tried. And that in itself is a win. And I'm not going to take too long. Okay, one other thing is also negotiate your pay. In the nonprofit sector, a lot of times we do not do this, and especially for minorities and women in particular, we do not negotiate. I recommend that you all negotiate your pay. Do not come into an organization and assume that they don't have the money to pay you your worth or what you want. If the pay or the salary is $60,000, you know, negotiate to 65 to whatever and capitalize off of your skill set and your training, and that can bring into Joel's point as well. So those are just tidbits, and I'll pass the mic to whoever.
Before you do, can I just jump in for 1 second? Because I think your last point, Rose, is so important. I think people think because we have, you know, generally decided to work in the nonprofit sector that we're not interested in any kind of financial revenue. I think there's kind of this stereotype that, oh, you know, we're driven by the mission and not the money. And I think the mission is really important, but the work is hard. And I think compensation is an incredibly important point. And I absolutely 110% support what Rose just said, and could not advocate more strongly for absolutely negotiating every single time you have your performance review. When you get your contract, don't sign it right away. Think about it, you know, do some market research and go in with an ask to really show that you value yourself and you value your work. So could not agree more on that point. And Joel, we'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. In terms of advice, I would think about three things. First, you know, based on my own situation, I would say be prepared to be surprised with where you might end up. You may, I think Allison said, you may have in your mind exactly what you want to do, and you find that what you have to offer is needed somewhere that you never knew that it was needed. And it can be pretty exciting to be able to offer your skills and who you are to a cause that really is making a difference in people's lives. The second thing is I would say network. Continue to network with your Penn cohort and alumni. Some of the biggest kind of sounding boards and feedback places are friends that I made during the time in the NPL program. They continue to be a great source of support, encouragement, and grounding. And some of these folks I know that, you know, we joke about being in the retirement home with each other. So they're lifelong connections. The other networking piece is wherever you find yourself at, make sure that you're working to network within the community, because it's those community connections in your city hall, in your nonprofit, you know, group or whatever the group is in your local area. So network in those ways as well. That's having, you know, finding those connections are integral to success. Maybe not at the exact moment, but a year from now, when you have a question or you need help with a local situation and you've got to find a solution, you can at least draw on those connections, especially if you're moving to an area that isn't familiar and home for you. The third thing is that Virginia is a pretty monochromatic state once you get outside of urban areas. And one of the biggest pieces that was an amazing developer perspective for me is one that our nation is reckoning with right now in terms of race. And I recognize that as a white male, I obviously have positions of privilege that are not shared by all groups. And so if you are in those positions of privilege, just a reminder to use where you're at to support and help to deal with some of the reckoning that we're dealing with in making sure that you're including voices that are not the majority voices that have absolutely crucial perspectives that we have to have moving forward if we're going to live in a just world.
Thank you so much. So everything everyone has said so far has really resonated with me, both as a person and an NPL alum. So I hope that those of you who are joining us today feel the same way. Sharmila and Allison, any advice that you have for current NPL students? Maybe Allison and then Sharmila jump in.
Yeah, great. So we talked about this a little bit, but just being patient. Always do informational interviews. You never know what connection is going to launch into something else. Treat the job search like a job. Success it doesn't consume you. Questions during the process. So the organization and the team as it is about them, learning about you and seeing if it is a good fit. So don't be afraid to ask questions. I like to joke that it takes a village to get your next job. So have a small group of people you trust or whatever group of people you trust to support the experience by helping you right before your review, process it afterwards, and be specific about who this group is and how much of their time you're going to need, because I have been part of other people's villages getting them jobs, and I have absolutely, brought people in to help me get mine, and it's just one of those both like really rewarding and super vulnerable positions to be in. And so you're going to need your people. And so pick them and lean on them.
Thank you. Sharmila, any advice from you?
Yeah, definitely have patience with yourself. I can definitely, it took me a while from transitioning from the program officer to the CEO and doing the bringing about the changes that exactly I wanted to bring into the organization. It takes time, so life beyond NPL wasn't a quick and smooth and fast transition. It takes a lot of hard work. It's not a smooth ride. It definitely wasn't for me. So just be patient with yourself, and definitely a lot of self-care. Keep in touch with your cohort, the NPL community. Keep in touch, keep actively in touch with your mentors, your professors, and just stay connected to the Penn community. I think you can draw a lot of support from there in rough times.
Wonderful. So before we transition to the next question, I'd like to add one piece of advice from my own experiences, which is to be both authentically true to yourself and unapologetically ambitious in pursuing your professional and personal goals. I've learned in my own career that there's no right time. There's no right time to begin a new job, to ask for a raise, to start a family. And that, throughout this all, we are our own greatest advocates. And there is no better time than the present to take those first steps towards advocating for yourself and pursuing your own goals. It'll happen that sometimes things won't go your way, or they won't turn out how you expected, or they might take longer than you want them to, and that's okay. And I found that oftentimes it's in those moments of greatest frustration in that moment that I look back and I say, wow, that was my greatest growth opportunity and the greatest growth experience that I have had. And I hated it so much, but I'm so happy that it happened because it has made me a much stronger and tougher person and just better professional. And the second piece of advice I will say is to network. I have found that COVID has been incredible for networking, which is so kind of counterintuitive because we're always told, you know, networking has to be done face to face and, you know, it needs to be done kind of during certain hours of the day. But what I found is that people are so much more available and accessible now that we are all, for better or for worse, tied to our computers. I read a book called The Most Powerful Woman in the World. The Most Powerful Woman in the Room is You by Lydia Fenet, and I highly recommend it. But she has this whole chapter on networking, and the hashtag that she uses is hashtag network or die. And it's basically the importance of building relationships with people because you never know whose experiences are relevant to things that you're doing now and being not only a networker, but a connector of others. And I think, you know, building on the network that you've already developed as students and professionals within NPL and within Penn, you know, commit yourself to having one networking cocktail, lunch, breakfast, whatever, with someone from the program and continue those relationships beyond the confines of your time at Penn. So those are my two pieces of advice. And before we kind of wrap up the formal portion of this panel, we're going to do some rapid fire questions, have a little fun, and then we'll open it up to questions from you all. So I have 3 rapid fire questions. You have about 3 seconds to answer. Joel, favorite NPL course?
Design thinking.
To Power Lab or not to Power Lab?
Yes.
Zahav or White Dog Cafe?
Sister restaurant of my favorite in DC, Le Diplomat Park on Rittenhouse Square.
Ooh, nice addition. All right, Sharmila, favorite NPL course?
Data analysis.
To Power Lab or not to Power Lab?
Not to Power Lab.
I appreciate the bravery there. Zahav or White Dog Cafe?
White Dog.
Very nice. Rose, favorite NPL course?
Designing the Future, Power Lab. Okay.
I'm sorry, so you are yes to Power Lab?
Yes, so also yes to Power Lab by default.
And Zahav or White Dog Cafe?
Actually, I would go with the pod because I'm not familiar with those. So right across the street, super good, super yummy. You should go if you haven't been.
Nice, got a great list of restaurants coming out of this webinar too. And Allison, favorite NPL course?
Anything that Jeff Klein taught. Anything that Jeff Klein taught. Can't remember the name of it, it was so long ago, but anything he teaches, I'm there.
To Power Lab or not to Power Lab?
Always to Power Lab. I love a good social experiment.
I feel like we need to get like.
And then, go ahead.
No, Zahav or White Dog Cafe?
Zahav at happy hour, you can sit at the bar. It's like 50% off. You get the hummus, you get the drinks. It's all good.
Perfect. Wonderful. So now why don't we open it up for questions from everyone else? Either feel free to write them in the chat, do the little hand raise reaction, or if no one's talking, jump right in. I do not believe that no one does not have a question because when I feel like I had 100 questions right before I started my job search.
I just want to say thank you first, and also want to say I think we might need another panel just talking about to Power Lab or not to Power Lab. And maybe the question here is for those who said to Power Lab or even those who said not to Power Lab, I'm curious, as someone who's graduating this spring and who took that course, what the biggest takeaway from that course into your professional life was.
I'll kick it off. Oh, go ahead, Rose. Go ahead.
I would say that it was one of the most salient academic experiences I've ever had in my entire life. And I grew exponentially in my sense of like cultural awareness and communication and just understanding of group dynamics. Granted, it was very tough. There were actual tears, no blood, but definitely tears. And things were challenging, but I would not change it or anything. I would never go back through it again, but it was definitely worth it. So.
Allison, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, like, don't make assumptions because you don't know. Like, check your assumptions, and that there's always layers underneath of whatever you think is going on, and to just ask questions to find out more.
Yeah, I would add from my own experiences that I thought it was really transformational in terms of both self and situational awareness. In my role kind of as a consultant, I both balance high level strategy with day-to-day operations and kind of managing teams and team dynamics and interpersonal dynamics. And I think the piece for me is that it's important to recognize everyone, not just those who you're interacting with. And I think it really helped me lead with empathy and to ask questions, not just, okay, how's everyone feeling about our donor strategy, but how was your weekend? You know, I know your daughter just had a birthday. Can I see a photo? And I think to me, it really kind of like broke down any professional kind of nuances and really made me think about people as people. And I think that is what I took away more than anything is the importance of recognizing people for their authentic selves and embracing and elevating them because of that. Also would never do it again. And also feel like we not only need like an I Survive Paralab t-shirt, but like an I Survive Paralab wine glass. But I absolutely
Yes.
think everyone should experience, and especially when you're thinking about nonprofit work, right? You have kind of ultra high net worth philanthropists who are supporting causes that oftentimes support underrepresented communities or kind of different missions. And so I think it helps you bridge the gap as a fundraiser or as a nonprofit leader to kind of help see different populations in their constituencies and recognize and appreciate their various perspectives.
Thank you for that. It definitely helped me, and it's something I will always take with me as well. I think, oh no, Atima, if I may, I think Atima and I were in this together, and she just messaged me and said, I think we need I Survived Virtual Power Lab t-shirts because we did it all on Zoom. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'm sure it was exactly what you did though. It seemed like, yeah, it was next level. And yeah, thank you for that, because I left that course feeling very stressed, and that was last semester. And now this semester, I'm just starting to piece together how it's fitting into my professional life. So I appreciate your perspectives.
Any other questions?
I think we have one in the chat.
I had a quick one if there's time.
Of course.
Yeah, so same as Tally, just want to say thank you. This was so insightful, authentic insight, that we usually don't get to hear outside of this. But I had a question. I fortunately just received a job offer. So we start working on Monday, which I'm super excited about. And I had a question beyond the job search. So once you're at the job, like how do you remain the best at it, right? So how do you stay at the top? Like what are some tips that you might have for professional development for those of us who like to learn? How do we continue to learn outside of the program? What have you done that worked for you?
Great questions. Who haven't we heard from in a while? Sharmila, Joel, do you want to start? And Allison Rose, if there's anything you want to add?
Sharmila's not jumping in quickly, so I'll kind of say a little bit. There's a couple ways. So I inherited my email address from my predecessor. So I was already getting 50 emails a day and had to unsubscribe from a lot of things. But you start to see coming to you those opportunities as well. There is our local United Way is sponsoring a conversation with our local delegate surrounding issues of homelessness and homelessness services. And so, taking advantage of that conversation isn't a sit-down formal class where you reflect and synthesize and write a paper, but there's learning that's going to happen, and there's the opportunity to share your voice from your perspective and your organization's perspective, and receive feedback from that. So there's learning in those always happening events and opportunities, and then there's always there's a local chapter of fundraising professionals here in Harrisonburg. And so making sure to join that and become a part of that group that has ongoing continuing education opportunities. The National Alliance to End Homelessness has an annual conference, and that's right now for my particular organization, that is the kind of the top level gold standard for people working with people who are experiencing homelessness. And so part of it is, once you are in that role, sometimes those opportunities are going to find you. You might have to search a little bit for it. You might have to do a little bit of work, but they will surprisingly find their way to you, and then it's up to you to take full advantage of them.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add? Otherwise, I'll give kind of my 2 cents.
I can add a few things. Definitely just to continue to be the best. I would say, like, still going to the whole workshops and free different trainings that I was talking about a little bit earlier. Also not being afraid to be creative and be innovative. I know sometimes, especially if we join, I would say, organizations that have antiquated practices and protocols, they may be a little bit weary of you being innovative and creative, but don't be afraid to share, new ideas that haven't been tried. In addition to that, you typically have like a performance appraisal or some type of form that says, okay, this is how you meet expectations. This is how you don't meet expectations. Seeing what the standard is and obviously going above that. Yes, you probably had a predecessor, before you, but focusing just on yourself. Like, for me, the way I approach things is I just compete against myself. I'm not competing against anybody that I work with. I'm not competing against whoever was in this position beforehand. And then usually my results reflect that. I would just say compete against yourself every day to be your best self at work. And I think that will help you be successful and continue to be the best in your best.
I would also add, I love that, Rose. I would just add, like, in addition to like external opportunities, like what is your organization providing you? Like, what investment are they making in your learning and development? I know that for me, I appreciated that my organization offered a leadership program that I got to take advantage of about 2 years into my job, which I felt like an investment in me. And then just to learning can happen anywhere. Right? It could be a book club. It could be a reflective conversation with your coworkers on how a project did or didn't go. So, don't put a box around learning as like, it's only in this institution, it's only in this classroom. It happens all the time. And I think you're being receptive to it, being open, and like really carving out time for good, earnest reflection is how you just continue to learn and grow, and to never get stuck or stale. And if you are, it might be time to move on, right? It might be time to like figure out that next opportunity, because if you're in the NPL program, it's because you have an appetite for like learning, social justice. Don't let it die somewhere in some organization that doesn't appreciate it.
This is all such great advice. I would add kind of a couple tactical things that I think I've seen that have really stuck out at me. So I think what I think the people who stand out in my mind are people who have made themselves effectively indispensable. And so when I think about colleagues that I've worked with and client partners, colleagues that I'm, mentoring or managing in my work right now, it's the colleagues that are always the ones that make themselves top of mind for me. So the question is, how can you do that for you? So what I would suggest is sending a weekly, like when I was kind of in the beginning of my career at CCS, I would send a weekly update to my boss Wednesday. And it was literally, my boss has like the shortest attention span of anyone you've ever met. So it was like literally accomplishments, challenges, priorities, 1, 2, 3. And that was it every Wednesday. And I would always make sure that I was quantifying my accomplishment. So if you raise money, how much money did you raise? If you have pending solicitations, what are they? If you're serving people, how many people are you serving? But quantify everything, track everything. Because when you're able to quantify your own contributions, then you can ask for more when it comes time to your performance review, when it comes time to negotiating salaries at future jobs. You can build on what you're doing and keep everything. So like I have a folder for like every year, and then you can go back and you can see how much you've done and collectively the impact that you've made. And so that's kind of like my 2-piece tactically, is to track, to communicate, and then kind of a high level, make yourself indispensable.
Thank you.
Any other, I think we have time for one more question.
Elizabeth, I think there's a question in the chat from Bingqing about moving to Seattle and tips for the job search there.
Yeah, that's probably a question for Sharmila.
Yeah, Seattle is a great place. So in terms of nonprofits and applying for jobs, there's a ton. Yeah, we can take this off call, but yeah, there are tons of great nonprofits, especially the big ones like PATH and for World. If you're interested in public health and all, they're always looking for positions. If you're interested in working with the homeless community and supporting local youth, there's Teen Feed, Roots, so tons of great organizations that make real meaningful impact here. Seattle's a great place. Rains a lot, but it's really techy, and it's really it's very sleek, but it's also quiet, and it's peaceful, and it's beautiful. Lots of hiking trails, and you can go outdoors, and yeah, it's only 3 hours from Canada. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sharmila. Okay, so I think at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy. Thank you so much, Joel, Sharmila, Allison, and Rose. It has been so much fun to work on this panel together, and so wonderful to hear your insights and experiences. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Stacy for a few concluding remarks and just some resources moving forward, but thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you again, everyone, for participating. This was really great. And before you all go, I would really appreciate it if the panelists, especially if they're comfortable, but everyone else as well, to drop their contact information in the chat. So emails, LinkedIn, whatever you feel best is the best place to reach you, because we want to keep these conversations going. And even just in the period we were together today, I saw some connections being made. So definitely want to continue that. I also want to highlight the NPLAA, which is the Alumni Association, is always open, and there's a Facebook group that's pretty active. So once everyone is done sharing their contact info, I'll drop that in the chat as well, so you all can access that and definitely join. I believe the NPLAA is also, correct me, Elizabeth or Allison, they're also searching for new board members. Is that right? Okay, good. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind as well. So I will put that in the chat now. Yes, and email Allison if you're interested in that. I also want to highlight a couple of upcoming events that are that might be relevant to some of you who are still in the midst of your job search. So on April 20th, Career Services, as in Penn Career Services, is hosting a job search Q&A for graduate students. So that is something that I would definitely recommend checking out. The link is in the chat. And then the last thing would be an online resources page that they have specifically for nonprofits. So I will drop that in here as well. Okay, but that is all I got. So I will stop the recording now.